Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Strange Appalachia. Um, Tonight's episode is one that's it's a pretty good legend. Has to do with something that we don't normally talk about, but it's either the Dogman or werewolves. Um, this creature has been reported as both those things, but this legend takes place at the land between the lakes. So just to give you a little bit of history about this place used to be called the land between the rivers. And then, of course, TVA steps in and dams it up, um, and it becomes lakes. And it sits between Tennessee and Kentucky, between Lake Barkley and Kentucky Lake, and it was designated a national recreation area in 1963 by President John F. Kennedy.
hmm
So,
and it does straddle the border between Kentucky and Tennessee, but I'm pretty sure the majority of it sits in Kentucky.
yeah, that's correct. So,
So yeah, this is an interesting one. I started making notes on this thing like I normally do, and normally I get about half a page of notes at the most, and I'm on 2 pages here, so that's there's quite a bit of stuff in this one.
yeah, it's one of the darker stories too. This one, it's not the normal, did we see something or, you know, kind of like shadows in the darkness or whatever. This creature supposedly attacks people and has supposedly killed people.
hmm
The first story I ever heard about it, it actually attacked a small cabin and killed everybody in the cabin. And the locals got a posse together to hunt it and never found anything.
Yeah, that was it was actually the most recent, as far as timeline goes, story that I found was the family getting killed. Um, but yeah,
Do,
I
do
mean,
you know what
there's
year that? Do you know what year that took place in? Did you write that one down? Because I found one from 1973.
this was the 1980s. I got one in 1973 that was a group of students.
Yeah, I have that same one. So, um, yeah, if you want to go ahead and talk about that 1980s ones, you probably got more info than I do about it.
Well, maybe we'll see. So the land between the lakes beast, or the beast of the land between the lakes, however you want to describe it. Um, just some general stuff on it. Like Charlie said, it's I guess the best description of it would be dogman or werewolf, half man, half wolf, bipedal, five-fingered hand, has claws on the end of the fingers. Over 7 foot tall, strong jaws, glaring or glowing eyes, and specifically the part that stands out to me in the description. And I don't know exactly how to pronounce the word that describes this, but it's digitigrade.
Digitigrade, yes.
Yeah, basically it walks on its toes and not its heels, which is, something common with wolves and canines and things of that nature. So uh, interesting. But
Yeah.
the earliest story I found of it was actually Native Americans, or came from Native Americans. It was the settlers that were moving in and expanding, um, westward, told of hunters that were going missing, hearing strange, unnatural howls in the night. And, at that point in time, bison were still, roaming the East Coast, which is, nobody thinks about that now because they're extirpated from the area. But they, at the time there were plenty of bison, and they would occasionally find mutilated bison, half eaten. Um, and even modern attempts to reintroduce bison into the area they'll still find calves uh, that are missing from the herds, and the whole herd is spooked. Um, but the 1973 story that you were talking about is a group of students that were from Murray State University, which is sort of close to that area. I didn't exactly look to see how far away it was, but I know it's fairly close to that general area of the state. and they went camping. One goes off into the woods to use the restroom, and when they come back, they heard sniffing the whole time that they were gone, like something was smelling around them, and reported that they were being watched or felt like they were being watched. So as they return to the group, they're sitting around the campfire, and they start to hear howling just out of the glow of the campfire light, and they hear what they described as swift movement all around them. Basically, it sounded like something large was running around the campfire, and that was when they reported seeing the glowing eyes, and they heard howling that sounded like laughter, which is definitely not any of the canines that are normally found in that area. So, of course, they get spooked, like any logical person I think would. They get in the bus, they leave, and as they're leaving, the people riding in the back of the bus said they looked out the window and saw a shadow running after the van, keeping pace with them. And so, of course, that freaks them out. Well, they come to a part of the road that curves, and they've got to slow down to take the corner. And when they slow down, they hear something hit the back of the bus, and the bus, it's like whatever hit the back of the bus is holding the bus, trying to stop it from moving. And of course, they gun it. They're able to get away, and they drive all the way back to the university. So again, like I said, it must be fairly close. When they get back, they find 4 deep claw gashes on each side of the bus, like whatever it was had grabbed the bus and tried to hold it in place. And then as they gunned it, it just ripped the side of the bus. So that was what I had on the 1973 story. You got any extra info there?
Not on that story specifically. But I've read a bunch of other stories that this creature supposedly is. But yeah, the story you read from '73 is the exact same story that I read.
Okay. And then the next, I guess, sort of specific story I had was 1980s about the family they discover. So you want me to talk about that one, or?
That's the one in the RV, right?
Yep, it's in a
Yep.
motorhome, and yeah, it's a fairly gruesome tale.
Yeah, go ahead. You can tell it.
So this family, and this comes from the 80s. Family goes out camping in this motorhome, doesn't check back in for a while, and somebody goes out to check on them, or somebody just stumbles across their camping area, and they open it up to describe just a really violent scene. And they find the mother, father, and young boy dead inside the motorhome, and they have just been torn to shreds. And they find the daughter outside, and the exact quote from the report I read was half eaten and lodged in a tree.
Yep, that's the same one I read.
So I don't know what lodged in a tree necessarily means there, but I assume the up in branches, I would assume.
Yes, that's what I would assume.
And the interesting thing about that story, well, there's a lot of interesting things about that story. There's no actual report of that crime scene ever happening. Yep. I mean, nothing. And it's been rumored to be a government cover-up, basically, that they're not reporting on it to help keep their tourism driven up. But I mean, it's one of those things with a lot of these cryptids where, who knows how much of the government cover-up story is actually a government cover-up, and how much of it is just there's actually no evidence, and that's just a convenient excuse.
Yeah, that's actually what I lean to, because typically they report people going missing and stuff in
Right.
the mountains just to get help to find them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, excuse me.
And the weird thing about that one is, you've got this story where this family is found mutilated in a mobile home. But other than people saying, "Oh, that's the beast of the land between the lakes," there's no evidence. Like, it's not like they found hair or they found footprints, or there's no direct evidence linking it to the beast other than it supposedly occurred in the land between the lakes.
So while you were doing your research, did you find any evidence of Bigfoot sightings in that area?
Um, None directly. I mean, there's the I think if you pick any point on the map of the United States and point at it, you're within probably 10 miles of a Bigfoot sighting.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I found a handful of pictures of tracks of Bigfoot tracks, and so if it walks on its toes, it's not going to be a Bigfoot track, right?
right.
But I didn't find any actual. But like I said, I found pictures of people supposed to taking Bigfoot tracks or pictures of Bigfoot tracks in the area.
Okay.
But I didn't find any pictures of weird dog tracks.
Yeah.
And there's one picture that I found supposedly of the beast, and it's a blob squatch.
Cool.
I could see how it looked like a dog man, but I could also see how it looked like a bunch of shadows in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the other interesting thing I actually found there's a cemetery there that's supposed to be haunted by Civil War soldiers.
Okay.
And I was reading a report of this group that went out, and they were looking for Civil War ghosts, and nothing really happened. And in the middle of the night, um, they heard a crazy scream, and then they started seeing weird orbs and weird lights. And the guy described the scream as the pterodactyl of the land between the lakes, because that's what it reminded him of, was a pterodactyl sound from a movie.
Hmm.
So that's kind of a
So,
weird thing to see. I mean, especially researching the beast of the land between the lakes, and then I found a lot of reports that had nothing to do with the beast, that were just supernatural.
mm-hmm.
One of them was a guy that was followed by lights. He thought at first that it was a motorcycle following him, and then he realized that the light wasn't attached to anything. It was just kind of hovering behind his truck.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, take that for what you will.
So something that, this is just a really cool story to talk about. There's so many different directions we could go with this. Two things that really stood out to me, as being just unique to this cryptid. I found reports of course, like, people talk about finding nests with hair in it. Um,
Yes.
but the other thing I found a bunch of reports of is army bunkers in the area. Um,
Huh.
and specifically, these are army bunkers that face inward. So it's almost like the people that are reporting these army bunkers are saying that the army went in and built these bunkers to keep the beast in the land between the lakes
Right.
and not let it out, and like they fought basically a war against it and destroyed it or killed it or whatever. So I was reading that and I'm like, I've never heard that before. That's an interesting story.
Yes.
And I believe this is our 32nd episode, somewhere pretty close to that, 32 or 33 episodes in. And this might be the first thing we've talked about that doesn't have a festival associated with it.
Oh wow. Huh.
Because I found no mentions of a festival of the Land Between the Lakes beast, which tells me that it is not high enough on their radar to try to market it.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I actually found reports. there's a gentleman, and I don't want to use his name because I don't know. It sounds like he's not into that kind of thing, but he is adamant that this is all a story made up, and he believes that this land between the lakes area has been or is being currently exploited. He doesn't even like the fact that they have campgrounds there.
Huh.
And he said that growing up, he grew up in the area. He was there when TVA, you know, first started coming in, or he remembers his grandfather telling him about being run out of the area. I don't know. His story was kind of all over the place, and he adamantly is just against TVA, and he thinks that they've done a bad thing by taking land, which arguably they have, but he thinks that the whole area is being just straight up exploited. He said, "I've never heard this story before. These things never happen, and I grew up here." And he said that the locals they hate everybody coming into the area, and he says it's just an out and out fake hoax.
Hmm.
So, and currently there's a movie being made about it.
I saw that.
The guy making the movie is a local as well.
Hmm.
And that guy says that the other guy is just trying to stop him from making a movie. So it sounds like there's some internal politics going on in the area as well.
Hmm. So did you
So
find any origin stories? Because I found 3 origin stories for this thing.
I found none.
Okay.
Not any that, I mean, other than somebody said it was a skinwalker.
Yeah, I was going to say the first one that I found was the Native American creature who shapeshifts, which would be your skinwalker.
And that's something like the more and more that I'm doing this paranormal stuff, the more and more people are trying to bring that skinwalker legend into Appalachia. There's
It's
not a
not here.
there's not a skinwalker legend in Appalachia. That's a western, like way out west
Right.
kind of thing. So
So
anytime people start seeing the skinwalker in this area, that's not something that unless it's moved to
right.
this area.
The second one I thought was kind of interesting. The second and third one both are interesting for different reasons. The second one is a story about a man who lived in Europe in the 1800s, and he left Europe and settled in the land between the lakes with his family, and
Ah,
that his family had a genetic disease that made them, and it was in quotation marks, mad after nightfall.
I did read that
hmm
actually.
And basically, the report says that the family stayed secluded there, and generations of inbreeding occurred, and finally somebody went out to check on them, and they couldn't find any evidence of the family living in their cabin. And that was in the early 1900s. So, I mean, that would only be 1 or 2 generations later, maybe 3 at
Yeah,
the most, and found the farm abandoned. And they attribute this beast to that family. And the third one is French explorers, as they moved into the area, were warned by Shawnee if I could talk, fur traders of a loup garou that lived in the area, which basically is French sort of term for a werewolf or
yes,
rougarou. They sort of
Rougarou.
rougarou and loup garou get used sort of interchangeably from what I found.
Yeah,
And the legend was that it was a Shawnee shaman that was killed by the village that he lived in while he was in wolf form. And this is his spirit coming back looking for revenge. But what strikes me as odd from that story is that the French explorers were told by the Shawnee Indians of the rougarou.
yeah. Well,
The Shawnee, to my knowledge, weren't the ones with the rougarou legend. That was the French explorer. So it would make sense if it was the other way around, in my head at least. I mean, I could
well,
be reading that completely wrong, and that just be their interpretation of it. But
that's what it sounds like. It sounds like it's just their interpretation. Which that whole Rougarou and Loup Garou thing, the Loup Garou is the French, and the
mhm.
Rougarou is that's from like Louisiana. That's
Yeah.
kind of like, us here in Appalachia. We went from wasp to wasper.
Yeah.
They went from loop guru to rougarou. So
But anyway, I just found both of those to be really interesting.
yeah,
Because, I mean,
yeah. And what's funny is here I am. I just said there's no skinwalkers out here, but that description is a description of almost a description of a skinwalker.
yeah.
So
But
it,
the interesting thing about the rougarou part of it is that they believe, the typical loop guru or rougarou follows the normal werewolf pattern of certain changes or phases of the moon causes it to change, but they believe that this one is a rougarou that has agency over its change, that it does it willingly and knows what it's doing and has control of it over it.
yeah. Well, I even like the Wampus cat. Some of the stories about that thing say they all say it's a maiden of some sort. Some say she's cursed to be that way, and others say that she can change at will. So, it's kind of interesting that those stories are um, very similar in their description.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that land between the lakes, I've known some people that have visited it looking for Sasquatch, and every one of them has described it as squatchy. I don't know what that actually means because
Yeah.
anywhere you're in the woods, it can look like somewhere that Bigfoot would live.
That is true. That is very true.
So, yeah, it's a good story. That's a place that I want to go visit. I've seen pictures of it, and you know what? I wouldn't describe it as being like, it's not like huge vistas, like you're looking off the top of a mountain and seeing just
No.
huge areas, but it is a pretty area.
So I've been through the area going to scout camp down there, and I can't tell you that the part I was in really struck me as something I would describe as squatchy.
Yeah.
I mean, it just sort of was there.
Well, I know that the pictures that I've seen of it, like there's not huge fields of vision.
Yeah.
It's very dense forest, and it's just roads between trees. That's what it looks like to me.
So I didn't go up into the actual like national park area. So, but you can, if you're one of the people that ascribes to the train of, or the line of thought that the national parks are set up to hide things. This is another one that sort of helps prove that point. Here we have a national park, and we also have a list of things. It sounds like not just the beast, but
Yeah.
a list of things that's happening.
And that's funny. That's what struck me when I was researching this thing was all the other stuff. I wasn't expecting ghost stories. I wasn't expecting UFO stories or strange light stories. But yeah,
I,
there's a
I
lot of
can't
strange
say
light.
that I wouldn't expect UFO stories, because I think the more that I research these things, if I come across something that can't be attributed to UFOs, it's not real.
Yeah, there's a
Nobody
lot.
has ever actually believed it if you can't say UFOs.
Well, there's a lot of UFOs that there's a lot of UFO stories that go along with it.
Hmm. Maybe werewolves are aliens.
I mean, that's what they're saying about Sasquatch right now. Actually, I heard a good theory the other day that said that I may have brought this up on a different podcast too, but that the Dogman is just a subspecies of Sasquatch with a snout for a face like a baboon.
Hmm. No, we haven't talked about that one before, because that's the first time I've heard it.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
A Dogman is just a subspecies of Sasquatch.
Huh.
It's got a snout for a face instead of a flat face.
I mean, it makes as much sense as any other origin story.
I mean,
Until
and
we find one, we'll never know.
and I don't even like. I know that I've talked to Bigfoot researchers that want to go to the land between the lakes, and one guy specifically was like, "When we go, we need to take every gun we own, just in case this thing attacks us."
I saw a lot of reports of that as well, of people saying the same thing. If you come here, bring firearms.
Yeah. But the craziest thing about it is you can't find any reports of attacks.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Other
I
than
guess
1973 and the 1980s.
yeah. I think that, people are just working themselves up over this thing.
And so like the other thing, and I should have pointed this out earlier, like with the family that was attacked, there's no link at all. Like I was talking about that links it to the beast in any kind of way, shape, form, or fashion. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing to say that it wasn't, just some deranged serial killer or, you know, any number of things that could have happened there.
Well, I mean, black bear,
Yeah.
you know,
But I mean,
although,
it's just weird that you have this report of this, and again, there's no actual evidence that this attack happened. But everybody just immediately jumps to this thing that there is zero proof of whatsoever being involved in the attack.
right.
I just found that weird.
Well, yeah, I find, once again, I can't say whether it's fake or not. Uh, People are obviously seeing something up there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very similar to other Dogman reports I've heard, especially considering it chases people or chases vehicles.
Yeah.
And it seems to keep up with vehicles. And that's constantly reported with Dogman stories where they'll be running off and then they'll turn around and see it behind them chasing their car.
Right.
You know? And, it's just one of those, I don't know if it's just a cultural thing where that's, attributed to dogmen or if it's just something they do. I mean, dogs like to chase cars, right?
Right. Well, and the other thing is a lot of canines are maybe not all the way nocturnal, but they work in the, I guess crepuscular would be the right word. I think that's the right word. My biology mind is working right. They come out sort of at the dawn or at dusk. And a lot of these reports are in that time frame of early evening, nighttime, not too far into the night. So, I
Yeah.
mean, biologically, that would line up for a canine of some sort.
Yeah. And then if it's chasing vehicles, it could be chasing it because a lot of dogs have that prey drive where when they see something run,
Right.
they go after it. And so if it is a canid of some sort, then that would fall right in line with that.
Sure.
So I don't know. It's an interesting story. It makes
Yeah.
me want to go. I think
Yeah.
it's, from what I've read with it, it seems to be more credible than a lot of the stories I've heard. I think it's more credible than a frogman or a cart.
Yeah. With a tarp
With a
over it.
cart over it, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Still the best excuse of a cryptid ever.
Yeah, maybe they've got carts parked all over the land between the lakes.
Maybe,
So,
maybe it's a giant government experiment to see how many different shapes you can see out of a cart being pushed down the road with a tarp over it.
so it's funny that you say government experiment because one of the weirdest things about the dog man, and we don't talk a lot about the dog man on here, but there are a lot of reports of the dog man around military bases.
That's true as well.
Um,
Now that you mention it.
and it's something that, I'll tell you the first time I noticed it is I've been reading some dogman reports, and one of them was in Germany at a U.S. military base in Germany, and uh, supposedly they thought it was a person dressed up as a dog, but then it leapt a 12-foot fence and ran off into the woods. And so then I just Googled dogman and military bases, and it's probably been 10 years ago. And there's a lot of reports about dogmen around military bases. And I don't know what the connection is between the two. Um, I read a report. This guy was interviewing Afghan vets, and he came across this guy at a bar. And he just started talking to him about Afghanistan, kind of off the record. And this guy was special forces, and he said, what's the worst thing about Afghanistan? And he said, do you mean military wise, or do you mean like just living over there? And the guy said, well, military wise. And the guy said, oh, hands down, it's the werewolves. And so the reporter thought he was joking, but this guy got pretty serious talking about how they would go into areas to clear them out. Yeah, I laughed too, but the guy said he was dead serious. He never cracked a smile. He said the werewolves. He said they're hard to kill. He said they can jump up and down cliff faces. He said, he said the werewolves were the worst thing about being over there. And that reporter was kind of taken aback, or the guy that was doing the interviews. I don't want to say reporter. And of course, this whole thing was off the record. He was just talking to this dude at a bar, sitting at a table. And the
That's
dude said,
crazy.
hands down. Yeah, well, I was talking to a buddy of mine that was in Afghanistan about it. And I said, this dude's saying the werewolves. And he said, well, you got two things going on there. He said, could there be werewolves? I guess. He said, but were they giving this guy any kind of combat drugs? Was he on anything? And he said, don't think that stuff like that doesn't happen. And
Right.
so, you know, I don't want to say, people were on drugs over there, but once again, I don't know what's going on. You know, but the werewolves, he said, was the worst thing.
Well,
So whether this guy was, fighting werewolves, or, they were actually there, or whether that's what he was telling himself to do what he did, or, whether they pumped him full of drugs, I don't know. I have no idea. But that werewolf story it's a crazy story that keeps popping up in human history.
yeah.
So
Well, any other points you want to make? We've sort of went on for about half an hour here.
yeah, it's pushing the episode. So yeah,
Little longer
anybody.
than we normally go.
Well, Land Between the Lakes is a good story. Anybody ever been to Land Between the Lakes and want to give us a holler? Um, Send us some messages there on the Facebook Messenger, and tell us your story, man. I really am interested in this story, and you know what? I'm not willing to write this one off like the rest of them.
Yeah.
You know, it's a place I want to go to see what they got up there. You
I'm
know, so we'll have to plan a trip at some point in time then.
Yep.
So you want to go ahead and sign us off, JD?
Sure. As always, we encourage you to reach out. Let us know if there's something you want us to research and talk about. If you've got a ghost story and know somewhere that we can go, or not just ghost story, but any kind of cryptid story, go and research it. Let us know. Check us out on Facebook at Strange Appalachia, or on YouTube at Strange Appalachia. And hopefully coming soon, we're looking at some ways that we can get on some of the more, I guess, normal or usual podcast sites. I don't want to quite guarantee that yet, but that's something I'm going to be working on here soon. I think I've got a pretty good inroad on that. So if you follow us on Facebook, we'll let you know, and share us around, and let your friends know we're here. If you like what you're hearing, give us a like and subscribe.
All right. Thank y'all.